I'm Cynthia Young, Executive Director for the SullivanMunce Cultural Center. In 1987, a group of 10 quilters met here at the SullivanMunce with then Executive Director Edie Mahaney. With that meeting, they were in hopes of creating a new show of quilts, and then the Charm Club was born. The purpose of the first show was to make charm quilts using fabric from each other's collections. What is a charm quilt? Are they charming, or is it just a funny name? We get asked that question a lot, as you can imagine. In a charm quilt, each fabric is used only once and not repeated. For example, a quilt made of 1,000 triangles is made of 1,000 fabrics. Continuing with the tradition of presenting themselves with challenges or themes, this biennial exhibition, now in its 18th year, has 2 challenges. The first one being words or letters, and the second being a shape, the circle, hence the name of the exhibition, Talking in Circles. The group meets monthly, either in person or on Zoom, to share their progress. Thank you for being a part of this wonderful tradition and celebration of quilt making at its finest. We hope you enjoy the show.
My name is Connie Lancaster, and I am a 6-year member of the Charm Club here in Indianapolis. We are going to present for you today our show, and I'd like to start by telling you a little bit about myself. I am a quilt shop owner. I've been quilting professionally for over 40 years. I do long arm quilting on commission. I make t-shirt quilts. I sell fabrics and supplies and have a lot of fun in my little quilt shop. Basically, quilting is pretty much my life. So I've put in 2 quilts for this show. The first one is titled If, and If is the quilt that I've entered in our theme using text or words. When I was younger, I found a phrase that was, "If it is to be, it is up to me." And I've always kept that as kind of a mantra, a little bit of a creed, and I bring it out to myself every once in a while when I'm struggling to make decisions or things like that. And so I decided that that would be my theme for my quilt. So I improvisationally pieced the letters for the phrase, "If it is to be, it is up to me." And I started the assembly, and then I realized I needed something a little bit more. And so I also inserted the phrase, "If at first you don't succeed, try again." But that's in very, very subtle piecing that is like secondary. And I wanted the first phrase to look superimposed over the second phrase. The second quilt in my entry for the Charm Club display is titled 3/4 of the Way There. Our second challenge is doing something with circles. And I used a pattern called the Blue Onion from Saginaw Street Quilts. And it's a pattern that I've wanted to do for a long time. It is again improvisationally pieced, and I used beautiful shades of light blue to dark blue, as well as lavender and light purples. And what you do with this one is you stack your fabrics, you improvisationally cut curves, and then you reassemble those curves. And I used lots and lots of different quilting motifs in the different arcs of this piece. And I love the way it turned out. One of our Charm Club members, Dinah Gable, has created a fun quilt called Send Fabric or Else. This quilt is from a pattern called Just My Type from Pen and Paper Pattern Company. Her techniques that she used were machine piecing, long arm machine quilting, freehand style. She also inked on fabric and used applique. So Dinah's statement says, "This project started when I thought of my mom, who was a reporter for over 10 years at our local newspaper. Monday mornings, there was always the sound of her typewriter at our kitchen table, pounding out her stories for the paper. The title Send Fabric or Else is a tongue-in-cheek idea of a story title for her, as she is still reporting in heaven, I am sure." So Dinah added a lot of fun touches to this project, and I want you to notice that she also quilted in some alphabet letters in some of the places in the quilt, and I think it adds a lot to the fun idea of the quilt. Dinah Gable's second entry is called Our Journey, and it is a 256 hand-stitched English paper pieced hexagon quilt background with machine applique over top, and she used hand-dyed fabrics that were dyed by herself and other dyers as well. Her statement says, "This labyrinth represents for me our spiritual journey as we go through life. God is at our center, and sometimes we draw near Him, and the next moment we may feel far away as we travel through our existence. As the labyrinth shows so wonderfully, our path varies many times through our journey of life, but we always end where we should be." Anita Hardwick is an original member of the Charm Club, and she's from Crawfordsville, Indiana. Her quilt, Habitat Rainforest, is an original design, and she used the techniques of drafting her own pattern, machine piecing, and machine quilting. She's a 4-H sewing instructor, fabulous at that, by the way, and also a quilt judge at many of the county and state fairs. Anita has a wonderful piecing technique, and she tends to use small pieces in most of her projects. Anita's words about this quilt are, "This challenge started with the letter H. Small vertical slices of solid colors were inserted in the solid colors of the letters. As the letters were forming on the design board, it appeared to be like rain coming down. This quilt expresses the beauty of our fragile world. We need to admire the earth's beauty and protect it for the future." Anita Hardwick's quilt, Circling on Point, is a fabulous quilt, again with tiny little pieces, which is what we call Anita's mode of operation. The techniques she used are, again, pattern drafting, machine piecing, hand applique, and hand quilting. Anita says about this quilt, "The basis of this quilt is the basic square in a square in a square block design. This design was enlarged, and then each section was segmented with circles and lines. Fabrics were used from those she had on hand, including one silk that she used in a project 40 years ago. We always hold on to our fabrics." Selecting the colors for this challenge, she thought was the most fun part of making this quilt. And we got to see this quilt as she was creating it. She was very unsure of some of the details as she was adding them, but we cheered her on, and we think it turned out just fabulous. Chutes and Ladders is Anita Hardwick's third quilt in our display. Cheerful colors, bright and fun and playful. It reminds her of the game, the children's game Chutes and Ladders, so hence the title. Anita said, "The circle challenge." She chose to use a variation of the Mariner's compass block. The compass was cut into fourths, and the arcs were drawn freehand or improvisationally. Each arc was spontaneously segmented, just creating as each was stitched. She enjoys the randomness of the blocks and the freedom when stitching, and appreciates the fact that in improvisation, no one cares what your seam allowances are. The result, again, reminds her of the game Chutes and Ladders with all the fun and bright colors.
Hi, I'm Barbara Triscari, a new member of Charm Club. Very excited to be a member with these talented women, many of whom I've known for several years. I am a textile artist here in Central Indiana and exhibit throughout Central Indiana and also nationally. So my piece, Life's Path 13, Full Circle. It is a piece done exploring the theme of life's paths and how our experience and life gets in the way of our plans and alters our paths. I began the series when my father passed and realized that a very important figure in shaping my path and a voice in my past was lost, but realizing also that he is still with me and still a voice that I can hear in my head due to his influence in the past and his leadership through showing me how he led his life. My next piece, I Hear You, is just 6 words that encapsulate how I have learned to truly listen and not letting my discomfort interfere with hearing someone else's perspective. Using their perspective to learn and research and leading me in a new direction of understanding and adjusting who I am because of what I now know, understanding who they are. So I Hear You was made using shears. It is one single shear folded over with some overlay of 2 other shears, so not a traditional quilt. There is no batting. You could consider it a summer quilt. The words are between layers and embroidered around I did not do very much other stitching on the piece because the words are the message. So adjust is very subtle in the text at the bottom because that is the last part of this journey. It is something that is not necessarily visually seen, like listening and learning and sitting with discomfort are. It is something that is changed in you that people very subtly see with time as they see how you have changed who you are. Kate Linkowski has been a longtime member of Charm Club. Her piece, In the Dark of the Night, was made during a period of turmoil. The sharp angles of the falling red triangles are countered by the large silver circle and the strong rays which cast sparkling light below. Kate's piece, Ecclesiastes Breaking Free, was inspired by the text in Ecclesiastes 4, in which the narrator speaks of envy and concludes that it is self-destructive. In this abstract composition, fabric, yarn, and color are used to suggest the isolation in which the envious person lives and from which she must break free. While the world she enters may be one of whirling winds, disappointments, and sorrows, there is also joy to be found. It is only by venturing forward she will discover her own gifts. I appreciate in her piece the glow that I believe the yellow and the swirling movement that is given by her choice of colors is a delightful piece. Kate Linkowski's third piece, Psalm 29, and the voice of the Lord shatters the cedars of Lebanon. The visual imagery invoked by this psalm has always fascinated Kate. She says, some years ago, I began thinking how I might create a quilt that captures the essence of that vision. The frightened deer, the shattered tree, the mountains dancing like young bulls, and the text lent themselves to a mix of embroidery and quilt techniques as well as fabric painting. I had to put the work aside when other concerns became more pressing, but took it up again last year. Kate's piece, Morning Prayer. Imagine yourself looking through a window, blinds at the start of a new day. This morning prayer comes from the mystical traditions of Judaism. At night, it is said that the soul leaves the body and returns to God. In the morning, it is restored to us so that we might walk in His ways and share our gifts with others. Mary Ellen Strawn is a new member, but has been quilting for many years. Mary Ellen Strawn's piece, April Showers, uses a tulip pattern from Missouri Star. She pieced and appliqued using a mixture of batiks and ombre fabrics. Her artist statement says, spring always brings brightness and color after a drab winter, and her inspiration for this piece came from the old rhyme about April showers. She quilted with superior metallic thread, which gives a little sparkle and feel of rain falling. Mary Ellen's piece, Global Warning, was made by paper piecing and applique. Her artist statement says, I saw this quilt on Pinterest and decided I had to make it because it was so intriguing. It turned out to be simpler than I imagined using 60-degree wedges for the paper piecing. When I pulled the fabrics for this piece, I was looking for blues and whites that represented the earth as seen from outer space. The background onto which the sphere is appliqued is an ombre fabric that sets off the tranquil blue globe. It was quilted with a variegated superior thread in a flame pattern representing our warming planet and the threat it poses to all inhabitants. Mary Ellen Strawn's piece, Caramel Roundabouts, was pieced using curved templates by backporchdesign.com. Her artist statement says, Carmel, Indiana has the most roundabouts in the country. This quilt pays homage to the roads that never seem to stop and traffic that is always flowing. One can get dizzy in the experience. I use solid colored fabrics and variegated threads by Superior Threads. Mary Ellen Strawn's Sashiko Circles was a sashiko designed by Kai Fujita of QHTextiles.com on pre-printed cloth. Her artist statement says, Japanese design has always had a place in my heart, and I was attracted to this book of Japanese patchwork because of the unique quilt designs. The designs were to be hand-pieced using templates, but I brought each block into EQ8 to design my own machine piecing. Sashiko is a Japanese hand-stitching technique, usually with big stitches and done with white thread on blue fabric.
My name is Judy Pleiss, and I'm an original member of the Charm Club. My first quilt is called Spring Mandala. It's in the circle category, and it was based on a stripped pieced kaleidoscope pattern that I found on a Ricky Timms tutorial on YouTube. It's like an original kaleidoscope when little pieces of glass spin around in a kaleidoscope. You don't know what you get until it appears. The same happens with the strip piece kaleidoscope, so I didn't know what I had until it was all strip pieced and put together. I decided to add machine-fused applique over the top of flowers to give a springtime look to it. A mandala is often referred to as a sacred center or a circle. My second quilt is called Big Fern. It is based on a photograph I took of a roadside fern in New Hampshire. I enlarged it to about 3 or 4 feet, it's pretty big, and I machine appliqued it down and did blanket stitching around the edge. It was a challenge to stitch because I wanted the fern to move forward and the background to recede. So I did a tiny invisible stitch all around every edge of that fern. And then I did a straight stitching behind it so it wouldn't compete. It is my impression of a botanical illustration that would have been more complicated had it been done by hand painting. The word fern is on the lower right of the piece. In order to do it, I made block letters, and then I did tiny, tiny stitching behind it so that the letters F-E-R-N would project forward. My third quilt is called Around the Garden. It is from a pattern from the quilt show in 2022. The design was originally called Garden Party Down Under by Irene Blank from Australia. Upon beginning this quilt in 2022, Ukraine was invaded in late February. So when I created the March block of the month, I chose to do the flowers in blue and yellow colors, the colors of the Ukrainian flag, and I also inked onto it the words "For Ukraine." When I completed the process of making the quilt, I decided I would ink all over it with words about peace, about war, about flowers. This quilt is machine quilted on my long arm machine, trying to do my best of what was for me a very, very big project. I like to think of this as kind of a funky modern version of an 1840s Baltimore album quilt, where there were vases of flowers and lots of ink work. Kathleen Randolph is a new member of the Charm Club, and this is her first exhibit. Kathleen's first quilt is called Smooth Your Edges. It is from a pattern called Embroidery Flower by Tony Finanger for Tilda Patterns. It's a free pattern. The techniques used on this quilt were simple piecing, but staying organized with all the colors was very, very important. Kathleen used a bundle of fabrics, but a kit would have been much more economical and easy to use because of the many colors required. Kathleen's statement about this quilt is that during her 25-year career as an executive, I was often called upon to resolve problems, settle disputes, and negotiate solutions. When discussions got heated, I relied on my internal mantra, smooth your edges, to stay calm and focused. The flowers in this pattern, with all their points and angles, looking much like a needlepoint or a cross-stitch pattern, are softened by the curved quilting design called Macintosh Rose, done by Chris Kinderman of Artistic Quilting. The quilt Circle of Friends is Kathleen Randolph's second quilt. It was quilted by Vicki Goltz of Linked Hearts Quilting. Her design is from the pattern name called We Are Family by Susan Smith. Kathleen machine pieced, hand appliqued, and embroidered this quilt using all fabrics from her stash. The quilt was made for her grandson, Wyatt Fitz Randolph. This whimsical pattern seems so appropriate for our adorable little rascal and his friends, Foxy, Cheetah, and his beloved puppy. Kathleen says that making baby quilts is an expression of pure love. Eve Howes is a longtime member of the Charm Club. A number of years ago, she moved to North Carolina, so we keep in touch by Zoom, and we occasionally see her at QuiltCon. Her quilt is titled Freddy's.com. It was quilted by Laura Davies, and the design is an original design by Freddie Moran. Eve says she was in the fortunate position to take a workshop in Berkeley, California from the delightful Freddie Moran, and it was a special treat to spend a day with her. I love the colors on this, and I love the quilting, so put your face in it and take a good look. The second submission by Eve Howes is called Miscellany. It was made and quilted by Eve, and it's a journal. Eve has been in the process of moving, and getting 2 quilts done was too much. So she's made a beautiful quilted journal for the theme of letters or words. She decided that the cover for a journal in which she could record her organized randoms or sometimes muddled thoughts using letters or words was a good choice for her.
Hello, my name is Jane Lee and I'm a sometime member of the Charm Club. So my first quilt, I've called it Bite In and Bite Out. It's actually a picture from Pinterest that I modified and made into a quilt that I could do. I used my own textiles, my own hand-dyed textiles to do this, and then I gave it to a fellow member of the group to quilt for me. The theme of the exhibition was to be circles, and that was a challenge. My second quilt was another one of circles, and this one was I made using logs to make the pattern. It just so happened that at the time when the challenge was announced, that somebody in the group had a pile of logs outside on their driveway. So I took several of these logs home, and then another member of the group had a husband who was very good with woodwork, and he smoothed the logs in order to get a good contact when I printed. The next one that I have, okay, so although it doesn't have all the qualities that a quilt is supposed to have, 3 layers, in fact it does have 3 layers, but not in the traditional quilt way. And my last quilt, the way we think. So in this one, I tore newspaper, placed it on the fabric. Where the newspaper is, the original color of the fabric will stay, but where there is no newspaper, the color from the original fabric has been removed. My challenge to you as the viewer is, can you see a story in this quilt? The other quilts that I'd like to show you today are from a member of the group called Pam Reed. One of the first ones on the wall is Wood to Fabric. As you look at Pam's work, you'll notice her work is very contemporary in design and colours. So what she does is she adapts designs she found in Pinterest and draws her own pattern. And as she herself says sometimes, the math in itself is the first challenge. Pam's work is very contemporary, or those that she's showing today are very contemporary. She does the design and she also does her own quilting herself. Her next one is titled J Gearing, and this work was inspired by something that she saw at QuiltCon in 2024, a work by an artist called Jackie Gearing. Circle Play was a design that she found on Pinterest, but it was a pattern called Orange Pop by Sophie Zag for the magazine French Patchwork. She calls this her own oeuvre d'art. This quilt reflects my fondness for incorporating geometry in her endeavours. And her final piece, Words to Live By, again an original design by Jackie Gearing. Words to Live By was inspired by an older quilt made by Jackie Gearing and featured on her website Tall Glass Studio. Our group's challenge to incorporate words came alive when I applied terms that are meaningful to me.